Some of the most damaging things someone can say to you won't sound cruel at all, but that's exactly what makes them so dangerous. Because when these phrases show up consistently in a relationship, they start to wear down your sense of self until you don't know what's real anymore. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and I'm a toxic relationship recovery coach. And if you think you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, I have a free checklist that can help you see how your experience stacks up with the typical phases of narcissistic abuse. There's a link for that in the description. So now let's count down 10 of the most toxic phrases people use in relationships, starting at the top and building toward the ones that do the most damage. So number 10 is, no wonder everyone thinks you're difficult. And this one doesn't just sting, it isolates. Because at its core, it's not just an insult. It's the ghost of a smear campaign packed into a single sentence. So whether or not they've actually said anything to anyone else, the implication is clear. You're not just the problem in this moment. You're the problem everywhere. And unfortunately, that lands, especially if you're second-guessing yourself or trying to make sense of what went wrong. So instead of standing up for yourself, you try harder to be easier because the idea of being difficult feels like a threat now. But that's the trap, because the less you speak up, the more power they have. It's a warning shot designed to keep you in line by making you feel completely alone. And if you've heard it before, you probably were already doing more accommodating than you ever should have had to do. So moving along to number 9, I said I was sorry. What else do you want? On the surface, this might sound like closure, might sound like an apology. But what it really does is flip the script. So now you're the one who's dragging things out. You're the problem now. Because, yeah, sure, they said the words. Or did they? Half the time, this phrase is the only apology you'll ever get. It's them claiming that they already apologized, even when they never said the words, I'm sorry, or I apologize. And even if they did say sorry, it was probably vague or immediately followed by blame. That usually goes a little something like, I'm sorry, but you. Fill in the blank. But either way, it's not about repair, it's about control. They want to move on their terms. And you pressing for clarity or resolution, well, that becomes the major problem. Not whatever it is they did, but it's you wanting an apology that is the problem. And now you're too sensitive, you're too demanding, or you're refusing to let go. And that can absolutely wear you down. So you stop asking for honesty. You stop asking for change because you know you're not going to get it. And you start accepting performative gestures as real accountability. But real healing doesn't come from rushed words or empty claims. It comes from behavior that matches the apology. And there's a little bit of a caveat to this. I do talk to a lot of people who are in relationships with narcissists that they cannot leave, or they choose not to leave for whatever reason. And if you're in this situation and you can understand that everything I'm saying here makes sense, for a real apology, you need some sort of accountability. But if you are stuck in this situation, it really does make more sense to just accept it for what it is that you're not going to get the apology, and to deal with it here whatever way you can. Do not, no matter what, under any circumstances, do not try to change a narcissist, because that's only going to drive you crazy and it's only going to cause more chaos in here than you really need. But if you're in that place where you're trying to figure out whether it makes sense to stay or to leave, whether this relationship is worth saving and you actually can move on to greener pastures, this stuff is really important to pay attention to. If there's an apology with no accountability, and that is consistent throughout the relationship, there's really no sugarcoating it. This may be a relationship you want to reconsider. So now let's get to number 8. Why are you bringing that up again? So at first glance, this may sound like frustration, like they're frustrated with the situation and with you. And to be fair, it's a phrase you might have said too in frustration, especially when they keep throwing something from your past up in your face just to deflect or shame you. But here's the difference. When you bring something up, hopefully, it's not to score points. It's because the pattern keeps repeating. Or maybe it's because the wound is still open because you never got that apology or accountability. And because the behavior that caused it is still happening. And it really almost feels harmless, like they're just brushing off the past mistake. But what they're really doing is they're shifting the blame. They're making you feel like the problem for noticing that it's still showing up. And suddenly the issue isn't what they did, it's that you're still holding on to it. So you start second guessing yourself. And you stop naming the pattern and you start letting things slide that are actually hurting you just to avoid being labeled the one who can't let it go. And that's what makes this phrase so toxic. It silences you and it reframes your pain as a character flaw. And all the while, it gives them a free pass to keep doing exactly what they're doing. So, number 7 is you always make everything about you. And this one's sneaky because it sounds like a call out. Like maybe you are being selfish if someone says that to you. But take a closer look at when it shows up, when they're saying this phrase. It's probably not when you're dominating the conversation or dismissing someone else's experience. It's when you're finally expressing a need or setting a boundary or naming something that made you feel hurt. And suddenly, this becomes a problem, becomes all about you. And this is classic deflection, because instead of taking a moment to consider how their actions impacted you, they flip the spotlight and accuse you of being self-centered for noticing how their actions impacted you. If a narcissist could be truthful, they would probably in this moment say something like, "How dare you make this about your feelings? Haven't you seen how hard I've been working to avoid responsibility? How about a little appreciation for my hard work, huh?" But the danger in all of this is that over time it trains you to abandon yourself. You hesitate to speak up even when something really matters to you. And when you have a problem that you want to bring up, you might even tag on a little disclaimer to make it just a little bit more digestible for the narcissist. Or you might minimize your needs. Go quiet altogether. And that's exactly why this phrase and phrases like it are so toxic. It really punishes you for showing up in your own life, and it makes self-respect feel like selfishness, which it is absolutely not. So moving down the list, number 6, you're lucky I'm still here. And this one can sound like a weird kind of commitment, but it's actually a warning. This message isn't "I love you," it's "watch yourself." And the sad and scary part is it doesn't always come out this directly. Sometimes it's said as, "Most people wouldn't put up with this," or "anyone else would have walked away by now." And other times it could be disguised as a sigh, a long pause, or a look of disappointment after you express concern. So maybe they're not saying the words outright, but they're showing you exactly how they feel. But however this shows up, the meaning is the same. You're on thin ice, and they're doing you a favor by staying. And this isn't love, it's leverage. They're reminding you that your stability, connection, and maybe even your self-worth now depends on them not choosing to leave you. And when you're already hooked emotionally, that's enough to send you into panic mode, unfortunately, especially when the trauma bond is at play. So you scramble to prove you're worth keeping. You walk on eggshells and avoid bringing those things up. You might apologize for being upset, not because you're wrong, but because the fear of abandonment feels worse than staying silent. And the danger in this phrase is that it turns the idea of being chosen into a power play. It's one that makes you feel smaller and smaller every time you try to stand up for yourself. So moving on down the list to number 5, that's not what happened. And this one, it's different because it doesn't sound particularly cruel. It sounds confident, like they're calmly correcting a mistake. But what they're really doing is rewriting the story while you're still living in it. And I want to be clear, this isn't about two people remembering an event differently, which happens. It's also not about a one-off misunderstanding. What I'm talking about here is a pattern. It's a deliberate effort to erase or distort parts of the truth, usually around something they don't want to take responsibility for. So maybe you're confronting them about something they said, or maybe you're catching them in a lie, or you're calling out behavior that crossed a line. And every time you're told that's not how it happened, or you took that out of context. And sometimes they say it flat out, and other times they switch it up with lines like, "That's not how I remember it," or "You're just twisting things again." But the goal is the same: to make you question what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt. And over time, it works. And it works for 2 reasons. 1, they sound so incredibly confident. And 2, a big part of you actually wants to believe their version of what happened. because it means you don't have to face the truth of the situation. So little by little, over time, you stop trusting your own memory. You hesitate before bringing things up. Maybe you start leaning on their version of events instead of your own. And this is the problem with this phrase. It's not just about dodging responsibility or accountability. It's about slowly replacing your reality with theirs until you can't tell the difference anymore. And again, if you could look at their reality and know that you would feel better if that were actually true, it's easy to help them rewrite history because you're clinging to that toxic hope that even if there's a sliver of a chance that what they're saying is true. Because in your version, you know that you have to face the truth and it's painful. And you may also know that if you were to see things for what they were, you would have to leave. And if there's a trauma bond at play, this is very difficult. And this is how sometimes we help them rewrite history. And you may even know you're doing it at the time, but it's incredibly hard to stop without all the information and without all of the right resources and tools to help you get through this. So moving on down the list of toxic phrases, you can't take a joke. So listen, this phrase doesn't just brush off your feelings, it ridicules them. And you know it always comes after a jab that went a little bit too far, right? Something that stung and you were right to speak up about, but instead of listening, they turn it back on you. And suddenly, you're the problem. That's a theme here in all of this, right? You're too sensitive, too serious, and too emotional. And then they're just the poor, misunderstood person trying to be funny. And to everyone in a crowd, it seems harmless on the surface. But this is how cruelty hides in plain sight. They'll say things like, relax, it's just a joke, or you're making a big deal out of nothing, just calm down. But all along, they're paying attention to how you react and whether or not you'll back down. And after a while, if you stayed in this, you might even laugh along, even when it hurts. You pretend you're fine, even when your stomach drops, or even when you're highly embarrassed in front of a crowd with somebody making fun of you, somebody who's supposed to love you. And you do this because pushing back never leads to understanding. It doesn't lead to a good place. It just leads to more mockery, public embarrassment, and maybe even the silent treatment. And that's the danger in this particular phrase. It teaches you to ignore your own discomfort and play along with disrespect until you can't tell the difference between being included and being humiliated. So we're getting towards the bottom of our list of toxic phrases, and we're on to number 3. No one else has a problem with me. And at first, this may sound like a simple observation, right? Like, no one has ever mentioned anything wrong. No one mentioned that they ever had a problem with me. But this, especially if it comes along with the other toxic phrases and if it's a pattern, it's not an observation, it's a setup. So you'll notice it the moment you speak up about something that bothered you. That's when they use this phrase to make you feel like you're overreacting. Or worse, you're imagining things. And their goal here is isolation. Because if no one else sees the problem, then maybe you're the problem. And that is the seed they're planting. And if you're already confused or second-guessing yourself, this self-doubt takes root fast. You start wondering if you misread the situation. You replay it in your head, trying to figure out what's real. It's super easy to doubt yourself when you feel like you're the only one. But that's exactly why they use this line and lines like this, because it plays on your need for connection and your fear of standing alone. And also, as a side bonus, it keeps you quiet, because if everyone else is fine with them, speaking up just makes you look dramatic or unstable or difficult. And that's why this phrase is so dangerous. It doesn't just dismiss your experience, it makes you doubt your own perception and disconnects you from yourself. Getting close to the bottom or the top of this list, however you want to look at it, we're on to number 2. After everything I've done for you. And make no mistake about it, this phrase is all about control. And it usually shows up right after you express something that makes them uncomfortable. So something that would make a narcissist uncomfortable might be like a need of yours, or a boundary, or a legitimate complaint about their behavior. But instead of addressing what you brought up, they pivot. And now the focus is not about any of those things that you might have brought up. Now the focus is on how much they've given, how much they've tolerated, and how good they've supposedly been to you. But the message is clear. You owe them silence. and you owe them grace. And if you're someone who tends to reflect or overanalyze, unfortunately, this message lands and you start questioning whether you're being unfair. And you think about the times they were supportive or did something kind. You wonder if bringing this up makes you seem ungrateful. But that's the trap right there. They're not helping or giving because it's who they are. They're doing it because they want something back from you. Maybe they want compliance, maybe they want forgiveness, and probably, usually, they want a free pass. And the real danger in this phrase is it uses selective memory to keep you quiet and guilt to keep you loyal. So the focus stays on what they've done for you and never on what they've done to you. And now we've made it to number 1, which is you're overreacting, which is an incredibly common yet incredibly dangerous phrase that you will almost always hear in a relationship with a narcissist. But a couple more things this phrase are effective and damaging because it doesn't just minimize your feelings. It makes you question whether they were valid to begin with. And it doesn't matter how you bring it up, whether you're calm, upset, just asking a question. It all gets dismissed in the same way. And suddenly the issue isn't about what happened. It's about how you're responding to it. So instead of looking at the impact of their behavior, the focus shifts to your reaction. So now you're defending your tone, you're defending your timing, or the fact that you felt anything at all to begin with. And if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist long enough, you get to the point where you know it's not you because you've thought 500 ways over how you could bring up this thing without setting them off. And you've thought of every possible way to say this without being offensive or argumentative. And you deliver it in the kindest, softest, most loving way possible. And you know you do because you've done this 100 times. But still, you're met with the same response. And I'm always amazed when I was in a situation like this myself and in speaking to clients, how effective this still can be at getting you to question yourself. Even when you know that you've done everything you possibly could to deliver this message, to bring up this topic in a way that is gentle and soft. And even if it's something that was really, really emotionally charged for you, you are putting the narcissist's feelings first. And you are masterfully sidestepping landmines that you've stepped in before. But still, there are more. And still, somehow, walking away from this, you can end up blaming yourself. And that's when you start filtering yourself even more. And you filter everything through the fear that you're going to be told again that you're just being too much, you're oversensitive. This phrase is among the most toxic because it chips away at your self-trust until you're no longer sure if what you felt was even real or if it was just another sign that you were the problem all along. So if you've heard any of these phrases on repeat, that is not a coincidence, it's a pattern. And now that you can name it, you don't have to keep falling for it. But awareness is just the beginning. So tell me this, which one hit the hardest for you? Drop it in the comments and let's talk about it. And if you're ready to flip the script, I made another video that walks you through the exact phrases that narcissists hate because they take the control back. So go ahead and watch that one next, but be sure you've hit that like button before you go, and I'll see you again soon.